She never planned to fall in love with the girl who could fix her laptop in 5 minutes flat and cursed so softly it sounded almost like a caress. Alina had moved to this gray, sleepy suburb on the edge of the city because rent was cheap and all she needed was to survive the winter after her breakup. 29 years old, a shattered heart, one suitcase, and a remote design job. That was her entire inventory. In the new apartment, the internet didn't work. The radiators hissed like offended cats. The walls were thin, and the stairwell smelled of dampness and someone else's fried cutlets. She told herself it was temporary. Just a place to hide until the pain dulled. Sophie lived across the hall in apartment 47. 27, short-cropped dark hair that always stuck out in the back, a tiny lightning bolt tattoo on her left wrist, and perpetual over-ear headphones that made her look like she was listening to a different frequency than the rest of the world. She worked tech support for a big IT company by day, but in the evenings she fixed everything for the neighbors in exchange for coffee, chocolate, or simple gratitude. Everyone knew. If something broke, knock on 47. Alina knocked on her very first evening, still in her coat, clutching the dead router like evidence. The door opened and Sophie, headphones around her neck now, raised one eyebrow. Internet dead? It never even lived, Alina muttered, handing it over like a guilty child. Sophie walked in without asking permission, kicked off her sneakers, sat cross-legged on the hallway floor, and spread out her tiny toolkit. 7 minutes later, the lights on the router blinked green. Alina stood frozen in the doorway, unsure what to do with this quiet, competent stranger who had just invaded her space and fixed her life with a screwdriver. She put the kettle on because it felt like the polite thing to do. Sophie leaned against the doorframe, arms folded, watching her with calm gray eyes. "You always this fast?" Alina finally asked, just to break the silence. "Only when a beautiful girl knocks looking like the world just kicked her in the teeth," Sophie answered without blinking. She said it like she was reading the weather report, factual, unapologetic. Alina blushed so hard, she felt it in her scalp and fled to the kitchen to hide behind the steam of the kettle. That's how it started. At first it was small, almost ridiculous excuses. The door lock jammed 2 days later. Then the bathroom faucet started its endless drip. Then Alina accidentally borrowed a screwdriver and forgot to return it for 4 days. Sophie always came, in oversized sweaters that slipped off one shoulder, smelling faintly of coffee, solder, and winter air. She never stayed longer than necessary, but she never rushed either. They didn't talk much. Words felt dangerous, like they might break whatever fragile thing was growing between the walls of that crumbling building. Still, details slipped through. Alina learned Sophie was terrified of dogs because a German shepherd had bitten her when she was 7, leaving a pale scar shaped like a crescent moon on her calf. That she slept with the window cracked open even when it was 23 below because closed spaces made her chest tight. That every Christmas she invented a new fictional boyfriend for her mother, complete with fake photos and rehearsed stories, because the truth still felt too sharp to say out loud. Sophie learned Alina couldn't sleep when it rained because that's when her ex had sent the cruelest messages, the ones that still lived under her skin like splinters. That she kept her ex's faded gray sweater buried at the bottom of the closet because throwing it away felt like erasing the last proof that the love had once been real. That she cried in the shower so the water would swallow the sound. One February night the power went out across the entire district. No warning, just sudden darkness and silence thick enough to chew. The temperature dropped fast. The old radiators went cold. Alina sat on the floor wrapped in 3 blankets and every sweater she owned, watching her breath fog in the air, when 3 soft knocks sounded at the door. "Open up, freezing princess." Sophie's voice came through, low and amused. She stood in the hallway holding a thermos, a bag of tea candles, and her laptop with a fully charged battery. Her cheeks were red from the cold, eyelashes dusted with snow. Without waiting for an invitation, she stepped inside, kicked the door shut with her heel, and declared the hallway the warmest spot in the apartment because the hot water pipe ran behind the wall. They sat shoulder to shoulder on the scuffed linoleum, backs against the wall, knees drawn up under a shared blanket. Sophie lit candles in a semicircle around them until the corridor glowed soft gold. She poured steaming tea into the thermos cap and handed it over first. They watched an old movie on the laptop screen, volume low, the only light the flickering flames and the pale glow of the display. On screen, the leads finally kissed in the pouring rain, desperate and clumsy and perfect. Alina heard herself whisper, almost too quiet to catch, "I forgot what it feels like to be kissed like you won't break." Sophie didn't answer right away. She closed the laptop, plunging them into candlelight only. The silence stretched, warm and heavy. Then Sophie turned, cupped Alina's cold cheek with one careful hand, and traced her thumb across Alina's lower lip like she was asking permission in slow motion. "Can I remind you?" she asked, voice barely above the crackle of the candles. Alina's answer was to lean in. It wasn't cinematic. Their teeth bumped first, then their noses. They both laughed, breathless, foreheads still touching, and tried again. The second time was slower, softer, deliberate. Sophie tasted like black tea and winter air. Alina felt something inside her chest crack open, not painfully this time, but gently, like ice on a river finally giving way to spring. They kissed until the candles burned low, until the only light left was the faint glow of snow through the small hallway window. When they pulled apart, just far enough to breathe, Sophie rested her forehead against Alina's and whispered, "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. Not tonight. Not ever if you'll let me stay." Alina couldn't speak. She just nodded against Sophie's skin and felt tears slip free, warm ones this time. The power came back sometime near dawn, fluorescent lights buzzing on overhead. Neither of them moved. They stayed on the hallway floor until morning, tangled together under the blanket, trading slow kisses and quiet truths in the half-dark. Now there are 2 toothbrushes in the bathroom glass. 2 sweaters hanging side by side in the closet. The old gray one finally made its way to the trash. Sometimes they still argue, playfully, over who's better at fixing the eternally leaky faucet. Sometimes they just lie on that same scuffed hallway floor because that's where everything important began. And when a curious neighbor asks why they're always together, Sophie shrugs, laces her fingers through Alina's, and answers simply, "She knocked on my door one winter night. I opened it, and I never want to close it again."